Welcome to the Institute for Management Studies Leadership Conversations podcast, where we have leading thought leaders discussing their research and identifying ways that you can incorporate it to take your learning and development to the next level. Welcome, everyone, to this IMS Leadership Conversations podcast. My name is Charles Good. I'm the president of the Institute for Management Studies and your host. This podcast is designed to highlight relevant research and practical applications from esteemed leadership experts and practitioners to take your leadership to the next level. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Rick Brandon, who has consulted, trained, and presented at hundreds of companies worldwide for over 30 years. He has authored the Wall Street Journal bestseller on ethical corporate politics called Survival of the Savvy, which was called the preeminent book on the competencies of organizational and political savvy. He's also the founder and president of a globally respected consulting firm. Offering workshops on interpersonal and political savvy, his courses have been taught worldwide in scores of financial institutions, Fortune 500 corporations, and in many government agencies. Thank you for joining me today, Rick.
You bet. It's a pleasure to be in your world again, Charles. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Rick. And I always like to start the podcast with something interesting in your background or some connection you and I may have, which in this case, it's pretty easy. We both went to the University of Arizona in Tucson. I'm born and raised there. You came there for your doctorate, so I'd love to hear a little bit about your experiences there. And what I always love about my hometown is the great restaurants in that area, which many people wouldn't realize.
Go Wildcats. I was actually there
down.
before the Wildcats and Luke Olson were in my consciousness. And I kick myself to this day. I didn't realize I wasn't a fan back then, but I used to love to go out to Gates Pass at the outside of town. Beautiful view of the desert and climb up on the hills, the mountains there, and drink my wine. I don't think it was box wine.
You never know, I guess there, but it's definitely a basketball town with Lute Olson, and unfortunately, they didn't have a good showing this year in the tournament, but I think the future is bright for that team.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people I love to go there because before that, my master's degree in school psych was up in northern New York, up in Canton, New York, which was 10 miles from the Canadian border, freezing myself to death. So it cured me of cold weather. I'm going to the sun. I drove into Tucson. I'll never forget the time and temperature. Bank sign said 117 degrees. I said, I'm home.
Well, yeah, it might be hot, but what we always say, right? It's a dry heat.
Yeah, that's right.
So
but then again,
right?
Are you aware, Charles, that Johnny Carson used to say, well, it's a dry heat out there, but so's a microwave.
I love it. Great. Well, in this episode, we really wanted to focus on communication, specifically those influence skills that build collaboration and commitment. And I love your new book. It's kind of what you call edu training. It's a workshop and a book for anyone who wants to develop that clear, empathetic, and positive communication that's going to benefit themselves, their teammates, and their companies. And it really focuses on those communication skills, assertive speaking, empathetic listening skills, and then funnels them into this step-by-step format in 6 vital workplace situations, which all of which I think any leader can benefit from or becoming better at. So why write this book at this point in your career?
Bingo. Yeah. So exactly. It's straight talk, influence skills, because everybody needs influence skills for collaboration and commitment. So let me approach that why now from a personal standpoint and then a business standpoint. It was COVID. It was COVID time. And a lot of my clients were not doing workshops, any kind of workshop, both in person. They weren't doing it because of COVID, obviously, but also because even virtual was challenging for them because of budget reasons. And so 2 things went through my mind. Well, I'm in lockdown, no better time to write a book. So I did it for that reason, but also to give people who weren't doing workshops a way to learn the skills. I wanted to put my handprint on my approach to communication and interpersonal skills because I've been doing it for decades, and I'm not ready to retire. I always tell my friends I'm on a 5-year plan, and I'll tell you when the 5 years begin. I'm getting there, and I wanted to leave seriously. It sounds corny, but not legacy, but I wanted to put my handprint on it and codify what I've feel is helpful in speaking and listening and getting agreements and confronting. And I wanted to do it at a time when people might not be able to attend the workshop. So it's there for other people. It is my workshop in a book because there's practices, there's applications, there's exercise journal that goes with it. Why do I do it in terms of a business standpoint? If you think about what's going on in business, we've got fast pace. We've got crazy emails and voicemails. We've got people unable to even stop to breathe, much less have a meaningful conversation. So the hecticness and full voicemails and the stress and ever rising performance bars, we're stressing people out so much these days. They weren't communicating well. It's so faulty communication clearly in my clients was, and just our own lives, we know it's true, was stressing our relationships, and poor relationships means lower productivity. So it seemed like a timely book from that standpoint. And then the other reason was remote work, even before COVID, right? I don't know if you've seen those numbers of how it increased the amount of remote and hybrid work. I think it's something like the remote work study that was done by Gartner that said that right now, moving forward, it's going to be 53% of us are going to be working at least partly remotely. And that means, and this is what took me aback, we're talking depersonalization,
Right.
we're talking social isolation, we're talking feeling disconnected, we're talking loneliness. There's a lot of studies that loneliness has increased and that leads to lower productivity and people leaving
Oh, I
because
think you're right. I mean, that
is
loneliness.
that your experience?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. And the loneliness factor really plays into why we need better communication skills, right?
Yeah.
As our society becomes more technological savvy, we are losing some of those essential communication skills that we do have, and we need to further practice them, reinforce them, especially at a time where you said where we're more alone, we're more disconnected than we have been in the past. But I love what you said about having a workshop and a book. Read lots of leadership books. A lot of them have great knowledge. They help you with that knowledge gap. But really, the skill gap is what you really need to work on. And to have that workshop in a book where you have skills, presentations, you have virtual apps, you have ways for them to practice. I think that's really key and essential.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out because it's not just a moniker. It looks cool on the book. Oh, it's a workshop. It really is. It uses actually a lot of the scripting from presentations that my trainers use and I use. There's demonstrations of each of the skills, so it really comes alive. And then the practice is with an exercise journal that's on the side that's downloadable and it's a fillable PDF that people can use, even for instance, with active listening. Here's the scenario. Here's what Joe says, Juan says, and they have to write down the reflective or paraphrasing response. And then there are 7 or 8 sample paraphrases that are like the answer sheet. So people can really look at it. Okay, now in your exercise book, write down a second paraphrase. So not to do a big commercial for the book here, but let's suffice it to say it is meant to be edutaining and dynamic, but also and fun like a workshop. But the main thing is practice, practice, practice. And even here's the thing that I'm really proud of it for the virtual world. Back to that, every chapter and every skill set, we talk about what are the virtual applications for email, for a virtual meeting, even for texts on the phone. So that we are trying. That's the premise: is that in today's depersonalized, disconnected world, one, how can we use these skills when we are communicating virtually, because usually virtual communication is an oxymoron. They don't go virtual communication. That's like a vegetarian meat packer. They don't go together. They can if we can up our skills. And the second reason in the virtual remote world it's helpful is let's not squander the time where you and I are together face to face. Let's make
Mm.
sure that we maximize our relationships to compensate for the otherwise disconnected sense. That loneliness thing, let me hit that one more time, Charles, because it really got to me. I read what I'm trying to think of her name. It's Noreen Hertz. Noreen Hertz in 2021 wrote a book called The Lonely Century. And she found that 1 out of 5 people are lonely. And she hooked it to lower productivity, people leaving, and even 30% are more likely to die, literally. So not to get too heavy, but that's what That's what it says. And it's pretty powerful. And that's what the data says is as we get more and more remote, people are becoming, there's more suicide, but there's more depression, more anxiety,
You hit the nail on the head
work
right there.
slowdowns,
Right.
all of that, just a cavalcade of bummers, to use that old expression. So the book is meant to try and help give a shred of hope for that, not the cure, but let's at least ease the disconnection. How's my clarity? Is that making sense?
That makes a whole lot of sense. I love how it provides scripts too, because I think scripts are so essential to help out new managers, even seasoned managers, having some of these straight talk conversations. Because it's one thing to be able to read it, but usually with communication skills, you really need to be with other people practicing these skills, having some role play with these skills so you get more comfortable in using them. So I love how you provide scripts, you provide some PDF syllables so they can put in their responses. So that's a great way, a great approach to tackle this very difficult subject. Now, I'd love to get into kind of some of these skills, and I know we don't have time to talk about all of them, but what skills constitute straight talk? And then I'd like to do a deep dive into one or two of those.
Sure, sure. Well, back to what you said, that these will help new managers and execs who are often derailed because of poor communication. Think of a new manager. They're promoted on their own technical or task expertise of their own results. Now they have to get results with and through other people. Abracadabra. So that means their listening skills and their speaking skills are even more important, because they're going to have people coming to them moaning and complaining and whining, and not just in a negative way that I just implied. They're coming with, they're hurting. They're having a decision that they're wrestling with. They're having a work problem that they need to vent about and need your managerial input, your advice, your coaching. So listening skills are a vital, active listening, but plugging them into one of those step-by-step scripts. I would say it not so much a script, but steps of a format. What are the steps to plug my listening and speaking into when I need to do what we call advising and guiding? Not just flying off the handle, but, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. So that's a skill. And then the skills of getting good agreements. They have to make it, new managers and mid managers and top managers, they often under communicate in times of great change. And we're in massive change. They under communicate. If anything, we should be over communicating, meaning getting good agreements with people so things don't fall between the cracks. So advising and counseling, making clear agreements with people, and then giving feedback and holding the person accountable for a broken agreement. You're a new manager, and now you've got to do that with the guys and the women and men who used to be your pals, who were complaining about the man upstairs. Now I've got to confront you constructively. They're in a real quandary. So speaking, listening in ways that help, advising and guiding, getting clear agreements, what I call gaining commitments, recognizing people with positive reinforcement, and reminding them and confronting. So those are some of the conversation applications. And then the last one is disagreeing agreeably. How do you challenge an idea if the boss is with you? You're not the boss. Your boss gives you an idea that he wants to implement new policy. Say, it's a boneheaded idea. How do you confront that? And how do you tactfully talk about that with what I call conversational Aikido? That might be a good deep dive.
I'd like to go into that more depth. I mean, I'd also like to just emphasize a point that you made, that the higher you go up in the corporate ladder, the more people skills matter. So it's not about your technical expertise. You wouldn't have gotten the promotion if you weren't technically sound and adept. It's more about how well you interact, your communication skills. And that's the critical piece that I think when managers come into it, either whether it's a new manager or they're rising up at some point, hopefully they've been more proactive, because it's not that easy to build these that quickly, but hopefully at least they realize the importance of these. And that is so critical as you get into the upper echelons of management at any corporation.
All levels. So yeah, so to your point, your emotional intelligence is more than twice as important as your cognitive intelligence and your technical expertise. combined, and that the higher you go in the company, it becomes even more important. So amen, brother. It's really important. And I love what you said about it's not just doing it, but also understanding why and feeling bought in, what I call the head and heart shaping, which is all about, I call it the straight talk mindset of understanding the business rationale for doing this instead of just throwing it out and just saying, oh, that's just charm school, soft skills, cow cookies. It's hard skills to learn and it achieves hard results. So yeah,
I love how you said that interpersonal skills are really hard skills. But before we get into that kind of understanding and you unpacking why you feel that way, let's get back to a little bit of a deeper dive on that last piece that you said about the Aikido and trying to give our leaders, those listening to this podcast, some good insights or advice around that. So if you could just role play with me or go through it and I'll be on the other side asking you those questions that I think someone would ask if they don't have that skill set yet.
okay. So let's take the example. The point here is that let's say you're my boss and you bring up an idea, and it's either an idea I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't disagree with, or even sometimes the bottom line is I can't support that. Here's why. Or I'm okay with the idea in general, but I want to bring to your attention factors and variables that you haven't thought of that could doom it. So how do I do that and have it not be a career limiting move, right? So we talk about it as conversational Aikido. What do most people do? They disagree. Well, that's never going to, the loyals would never approve of that, Charles. Well, let's go through 4 steps that are not force against force, not Western boxing metaphor of fighting the opponent with my pushback, but the Eastern martial arts of Aikido is all about aligning with the opponent, even blending with their energy, like blending with the energy of when you tame a wild stallion, you don't slap a bitten saddle on it, you ride bareback with it and then gradually tame it. You would think I didn't grow up in St. Louis, but in Texas, but I did. Well, my friends down in Texas, Mike Godwin, your chairperson for IMS down there, would tell us that. So how do we align? First 2 steps, first 3 steps of this conversational Aikido for disagreeing agreeably. Step 1, let's say you bring me an idea that you want to, that I don't agree with. The first thing I'm going to do is listen instead of roll my eyes. Secondly, I'm going to use that active listening technique of paraphrasing, not just the content, but how you feel about it. So, wow, Charles. So it sounds like the announcement you want me to make, let's say you're a finance manager and I'm a controller, and we both report to a CFO. So Charles, sounds like you're wanting me to work with our 3 newly acquired businesses and let them report their monthly numbers at the end of the month in their old company format, their legacy company format, so that they don't feel like we're force fitting them into our cookie cutter uniform approach. And you would probably be okay with me listening to you and trying to understand and show empathy for your point of view. Yeah. True.
Oh, that's excellent. I mean, the first step is always try to bridge that gap, show the empathy, make sure, like what you stated, that you're blending with the other individual. So it doesn't feel like from the start that we're taking opposing positions and we're digging each other's our respective feet in the sand, right?
Amen. And now I'm aligned with you. I'm not your opponent. I'm your partner, at least at this point. And I might even paraphrase even more. Sounds like, Charles, it sounds like you're thinking there might be some real political benefit and some rapport benefit, that they won't be resenting us as swallowing up their companies. We're trying to get to know them. And also, it seems like that's because you've talked to me before about political savvy, and that's an important step. That's part of political savvy, is to understand how our finance department's being perceived, and this will help us. So I'm getting your alignment along the way. I'm hearing it, and I'm not doing it in a BS way. It's genuine. I'm trying to understand. The third step better be genuine too, which is now I've attended non-judgmentally to you, body language wise. I've paraphrased empathically and accurately and checked to make sure that I've heard you right. Now, step 3 is I share what I see as the merits in your idea, even if I don't agree with it overall. Charles, I can really see where that really will help us from a politics standpoint standpoint. It will help build rapport. It will help correct that perception of us in finance, even with non-acquired companies. We're often our ivory tower. We're not trying to shove a cookie cutter approach on them. Is that what part of what your rationale was? Even if it wasn't, you're going to say, yeah, how perceptive of you, Rick, for noticing.
Right.
And it might even add another benefit. Charles, this is going to force me to sit side by side with the new businesses and look at their format, their finance form, and align literally side by side. So I'll learn a lot more about their businesses, which we can share throughout the finance department.
I love this approach. And I feel that for someone not familiar with it, they can maybe go too far down this path before the but comes, right? So
Yeah.
how do you transition now, or in how long should you take to build that? Do you want to build it to the point where people are nodding with you, they're leaning in, you see that mirroring, that agreement, and you have a good feeling that they're on board with what you're saying? How do you now transition it into, here are some of the issues I see with this as well?
Yeah. And that's often what you're talking about, is often the biggest concern that people have. Wait a minute. Even step 1, 2, and 3, they could think that I agree with them. Oh, Rick agrees. Okay, let's go ahead and announce it. Well, first off, they won't think that, because there is a step 4, which is called surfacing my concerns. I am going to surface my concerns and asking permission. Okay, Charles, if I see a lot of benefits, I do see 1 or 2 concerns. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't share it. I said, okay, if I share those with you, and then I share what I think the solution is, because you don't want to go to the boss only sharing problems. They want to see and hear solutions. In terms of your question, how do I know what's too much? The answer to every question in our workshop, besides we'll get to that after the break, or the answers in the book, or what does the group think, is it depends. It depends on you knowing that person. It depends on seeing, are, do you think you've gone too far? Your inner gut will tell you. And it's being sort of body language reader. If it looks like they're starting to feel relieved that and they're ready, or they're looking at their watch, you better move on. So I apologize for not giving you an equation, but the point is, I don't think you can I don't think you can ever overdo the listening piece, the step 1 and 2. The third one, you want to give enough benefits, and you want to make them genuine and not BS. And sometimes you can't find a reason. You're not going to make one up. So you'd stop sooner in that case, but at least give some positive reinforcement. I can't think of a benefit of the idea content wise or business wise, but can't I support the fact that, wow, it really looks like you've got a lot of passion for this, and I appreciate the energy and homework you've done on presenting it, even if I don't agree with the content. So those are some of the things that can happen, but it's really about using your sniffer. It's sniffing around and seeing, how does it feel? Does it feel time? Then I move to step 4. And even if I have stayed too long, Charles, when I will let you know in no uncertain terms, in a tactful, assertive, rather than aggressive or passive way, that here's what I'm concerned about. You don't even have to say, I disagree. You say, here are my concerns, and then we discuss it. And obviously, with the finance thing, I'm going to be comparing their form to ours, and it's going to take longer because we're comparing apples to oranges. We both know our boss, Jim, as CFO, wants turnaround in 48 hours. So that's my concern. And then we talk about it and problem solve. Yeah, I hear myself getting really excited, enthused. I'm not trying to be evangelistic about it. It's my own belief in the skills, rather than, hey, this is I'm not trying to be a know-it-all here. How does this make sense though? What concerns would you have, Charles, about trying to use this, other than the one you just said? And any others?
No, I like how at the end, the 4th and final step, right? Ask for permission. I think that's critical before you give advice, and then
Mhm.
avoiding certain words. Here are my concerns versus here's what I don't like, what I disagree with. And that sets a more opposing situation than it does where we're still in this together. But would it be okay if I gave that advice to you, and here are some of those concerns? Now, the follow-up step would be, you gave the advice, you think it's valid, yet the supervisor comes in and says right after, yeah, but I'm still going to do it my way. Or, I hear you, but that's not something I'm willing to do at this time. What would be the best approach then in that situation, to say, okay, you got your point out. It didn't go the way you wanted. Would there be a more tactful way to readdress it? Should you let it go and keep using this method in the future? In some cases, I know with some supervisors, it's just difficult. It's their way or the highway. They're more autocratic. So with a stronger personality, do you take it up a level or do you continue on the same path?
Well, let's ask the group. We'll get to that after the break. The answer's in the book. No, just kidding. Well, it really does depend here minimally. And this, what this partly depends on is really a whole nother kind of savvy. We're talking about interpersonal savvy. This depends on political or organizational savvy that, I believe we're going to talk about in another podcast down the line. And that, of course, political savvy means what kind of person is this? Are they an ego tripper, a power tripper, someone that is so into their abusive power? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I want to be savvy and astute and know I want to pick my battles carefully. So it depends on this issue. Is anyone going to die if it takes a little more time and then I have to problem solve it? Or is this really mission critical? So what's the urgency of the issue? What's their ego strength or their ego tripping level? And the other thing that I do want to mention while we're doing this, the boss might in a meeting say my way or the highway because there's ego there. And so now in the meeting afterwards, I might say to you, Charles, I understood why you took the stance and kind of laid down the law, though. You're the decision maker and my job is to support you. I want you to know two things, Charles. The first is I wouldn't be doing my job if I pretended like an idea was 100% foolproof. I view my job is to make you look great and make the company look great by reality testing anything I'm concerned about. So I trust that you understand that. The second thing I'll say to you, Charles, and this is in the meeting afterwards, Charles, I actually disagreed even more than I stated in the meeting. I didn't think that was appropriate to do. So here's why. Now, the fact that I saved your ego there, I think is going to earn me the right to really be a straight talker. And so does everything else I do with you before this meeting. How do I support you? Am I a reliable worker? So there's so many depends I'm giving you about my capabilities and my job and my trust building and what I do now if you say that's the way it is. Okay, I hear you. My job is to make this work as best as possible. I just wanted to make sure we both had eyes wide open. So I've given you about 20 answers there. Have I overdone it there?
No, that's great information. And I want to get to one more topic before we have to end this episode, but I think this is invaluable for managers, for leaders at any levels, because they always have those tough conversations, right? So having this template, having these skills in place, of which you have to practice, is going to be essential for them moving forward and getting to that next position on that corporate ladder. So I know that communication skills are essential. They are, they are essential regardless of what spot you're in. And if you could just say a little bit more about the competitive advantage that they confer. What are you claiming about business bottom line payoffs for having world-class interaction skills?
You bet. So we've talked about faulty communication creates all kinds of costly time drains, misunderstood data that wastes time and costs billions is what the research says each year. But you also have the issue of engagement. People are quickly leaving because of faulty communication. Gallup found some years back, 30% of employees aren't fully engaged. And it even has risen as up to 33%. And the number one and two reasons are lack of recognition in one of their studies. Another one says, my manager. And so that's all about communication skills. It ain't that they don't like how they dress. It's the treatment. So engagement is key, both for a non-manager, but also for executives are derailed. And one of the most frequent reasons is poor communication. And the conference board has estimated that it costs 150% of that executive's salary to replace a derailed manager. Not that every manager is derailed because of communication, but a lot of them are. Another bottom line competitive advantage is through innovation. So what kind of communication fosters innovation and people sharing ideas? It won't happen if people are afraid to say their ideas because it'll be stifled, put down, not heard, et cetera. Years ago, Kodak was ahead of the competition in innovation. And then suddenly people started to feel afraid of sharing their ideas, and their innovation atrophied. So it's about innovation. It's about engagement. It's about lowering executive derailment. It's about a cleaner communication process when it comes to getting agreements and holding people accountable. That's called productivity and results. That's a kind of a cavalcade, a circus of stars, if you think about it. Not to mention, just look at your own work life. I don't know about you, but if I were to list the problems I've had in the last month and coded them either a task related problem or an interpersonal skills problem, communication, it's at least as many of the relationship communication ones. And those are the ones that keep me up at night.
Couldn't agree more, especially with the great resignation happening right now and people that are looking at these areas, right? And you've identified really the top two: the accountability, their manager, their boss, not doing what they need to do. And a lot of that falls under that communication skill category by far, because these skills, they aren't to be taken lightly. They're really not soft skills. They're hard skills, like you mentioned, that need to be practiced and improved over time. And as we become lonelier as a society, as we're more disconnected, it becomes more difficult to practice these, right? Because the virtual
Yeah.
stage versus a live in-person communication is a lot different. So it's also learning how to navigate those new waters so that we can become even more successful moving forward.
Amen. You should write a book called Straight Talk: Influence Skills for Collaboration and Commitment.
Well, you've got a great one right now that's
I beat you to it.
May, and I'm excited for it to come out. I have read it. Great book. I encourage everyone listening to look for it on Amazon when it comes and to make sure you get your copy. So as we near the end of this episode, I always like to ask each one of my guests, is there something, one tip that you could recommend to leaders listening to be more effective in communicating or to help with their straight talk skills?
Can I give you the first 40? Just kidding.
Let's
Uh,
pare it down a little bit.
okay. Yeah. Cause we've talked about listening, speaking, clear agreements, but in terms of leaving us, I want to go back to the internal communication, what I call the straight talk mindset. So I need to make sure my self talk is in a healthy place, that I'm emotionally and mentally fit to use these skills. So that means I've got to commit. I have to convince myself that this is worth it for all the, that's why we talked about the competitive advantage. And so I need to talk to myself differently. My self talk needs to be in a positive place about why I'm doing this, including myself talk about each of the skills, so I'm not being a hard ass if I'm confronting someone. I'm working with accountability. So think about, I would say to the listeners, think about how your self talk and how you talk to yourself either creates positive, assertive feelings or makes you feel intimidated. I don't have the right to say this, or he's going to get really mad at me. Manage your self talk and you'll use the skills in the first place and you'll use them more successfully and effectively.
Great advice. Mindset, self-talk is essential. Had a guest on recently that said, even imagine the type of person you want to be. Maybe there's someone out there that's already successful, someone famous, and imagine you're that person and you're exuding that skill that they're known for, just to put you
It's
in the right mindset so that you can be more successful in that conversation or communication with that other individual.
That's beautiful. And self talk includes that kind of imaging, but also visualizing a tough conversation. That's self talk. See it happening successfully. That's beautiful.
Rick, remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you.
Well, my email is rick@brandonpartners.com. My last name, partners, plural, rick@brandonpartners.com. But to learn more about the book, it's brandonpartners.com/straight talk book. brandonpartners.com/straight talk book. And in fact, free gift for anyone that goes there, you will see there not just information about the book and more about what's in it, but a free self-talk assessment. It's 35 questions about your self-talk in each of the major skill areas. You don't pay anything. You just download it and take that baby, and it's helpful, as well as several other reinforcement and learning tools. So encourage everyone to go there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today, Rick. This concludes this episode of the IMS Leadership Conversations podcast. You can send us your feedback at info@ims-online.com. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, it can be found both on Apple and Spotify. And until next time, remember, it's not what you know that makes a difference, but what you do consistently.